We are shown an ordinary apartment building. Immediately, the protagonist heard the sound of SMS. He was sitting with the phone in his hand and crying a lot, and his heart was broken. The girl wrote to the guy that she wants to break up with him. The name of the protagonist is Chen Yuan. He wrote with very nervous fingers to Tun what happened and why she made such a decision. He thought that he and his roommates decided to play truth or dare. He asked her not to do this to her. His feelings for her are more than serious. He even sent her a smiley face where the guy is holding his hair. He didn't understand what he had done wrong. He didn't think he was good enough, but he had already planned out their future together. They would have a wonderful family, 2 beautiful children, a house and a car. He has been doing his best to bring this to life. The protagonist was typing all this and crying a lot. He suggested that it was all because he couldn't buy her a purse. He assured her that he was saving up and would be able to buy it next month when the scholarship came. A notification immediately appeared that she had blocked it and the last message was not delivered. The protagonist believed that life was a pain. Immediately his friend came to him and realized that he was in a bad mood today. He quickly turned around and apologized for bothering him. The protagonist hit the table hard with his fist and his bowl of noodles fell to the floor. He left the room and his friends noted that he was abandoned again, and this is the 6th time this month. After we are shown a busy street, the girls recognized Chen Yuan and considered him a stickler. He's been chasing Shu Tong for 3 years. Tong asked Chen not to do this because people are looking at them. The protagonist handed her a bag and said that he understood that she was angry, but he bought her favorite fried pork. He asked her not to talk about the breakup anymore. If she doesn't like something about him, she can always tell him and he will change. 2 friends heard all this and the girl said that she heard that Chen worked 4 jobs at once so that he could afford to give her gifts. And there is no result, she left him anyway. The girl replied that she was not angry with him. Her ex-boyfriend wants to get together with her. After much thought, she came to the conclusion that he really needed more. The protagonist screamed a lot because it was Huang Zhengkai and he didn't understand how. Chen said he was a scumbag and asked her if she had forgotten how he had deceived her and she was letting him powder her brains again. Immediately, an expensive Mercedes car drove up from behind. The window came down and it was Huang himself. He told Shu Tong to jump into his car. The girl came up to her and opened the door saying that it was better for them not to meet again, because her boyfriend might not understand correctly. After that, she got into the car and they drove forward, while the protagonist looked at the road. He obviously threw Tong's favorite food in the trash. Chen walked into a local convenience store. He took a bottle of water and started drinking it. He didn't understand why no one appreciated sincerity. He thought he was so worthless that he could only suck up to everyone. Immediately, he squeezed the empty bottle and felt that there was nothing wrong with being courteous. He was very angry and realized that he only needed to do it properly and then he would become not a sycophant, but a Casanova. A system window immediately appeared, which informed that the strongest system of the stickler had identified a suitable candidate for the role of host. The connection was successful. He had personal funds of 230 yuan, but the account of the system stuck 90 quadrillion yuan. The protagonist was shocked by the system and did not understand what it was. He reached forward to the girl's melons and wondered what this system allows you to do. Immediately, the girl shouted so that the pervert looked at what he was doing and watched his hands, and the protagonist was very surprised and confused. It was a blue-eyed blonde who thought that he had been staring at her from the very beginning and added that he was definitely not right in the head. Her name is Zhu Liu. She is 21 years old. Her attractiveness index is 7.9, and her disposition towards Chen is 50. The protagonist was still in shock and did not fully understand what was happening and what kind of data he would see in front of him. The system added that only the location parameter will reach 96 points. It will be possible to make a counterattack and she will become a fan of the owner. 1-2. The protagonist looked at the system window, where it was written about 96 points and thought that it was possible to use the system. The protagonist did not understand whether he needed to spend this money on women. 90 quadrillion. The system agreed. She said that the entire amount is on this card, but only women can use it. When the user of the card becomes a fan of the owner, a tenth of the amount spent will be credited to the owner's personal account and can be used at his request. In addition, the owner can receive other rewards. The protagonist also understood how things are here. He thought that he could use this girl as a test mouse and smiled maliciously. He asked the beautiful lady not to be angry. He assured her that whatever she wanted today, everything was at his expense. The system reported that the implementation of the stickler was successfully completed. Task: counterattack Zhu Liu reward for execution, 10% of system funds, 5 gain points. The girl thought that he was pretending to be rich and just wanted to show off in front of her. She didn't believe he could do anything at all. People discussed and said that it was Sui Leal, the first beauty of the Faculty of Art. The guy had heard that she was quite adept at spending other people's money. Somehow, she only had a couple of words and the man spent 30,000 yuan on her, and they thought that the protagonist had big problems. Chen asked her not to rush into words, because until you try, you won't know. The girl held out her phone and said that today was such a good day, and why not treat all the classmates with sweets in the buffet. She asked if he would help with the financial part of the issue. The girl noted that he was dressed like a beggar but was trying to show off in front of the beauty. She wanted to show him what a real shame is. Immediately he paid and 50,000 yuan was credited to her account, and the girl was surprised and embarrassed. Everyone was surprised that he just took and transferred 50,000 yuan as if it didn't cost anything. This guy looks as unremarkable as possible. And now it turns out that he is actually a major. The protagonist noted that 50,000 is not so much. Then he showed his phone and smiled and said that it was enough to get her WeChat. The girl assumed that she was mistaken and this guy is really a major. She smiled and decided to act. Sui approached him and asked him not to worry. She decided to add WeChat, and the protagonist was surprised. Immediately she approached him and added that from the beginning he would go to the same place with her. And the protagonist became even more confused and even began to sweat. She wanted to see how long he would last. After that, she went out onto a busy street where it was already night. To begin with, she would like to clarify something. She is not a mercantile girl at all. She just wants to understand how sincere and serious he is towards her, and she took him to the store with the most expensive clothes. The protagonist thought about how the more she spent, the more he would get back. Chen said there was no problem with that, and she could choose whatever she liked. Tame your appetite, my dears, and you will conquer human nature. Just a wonderful sample for testing the system. The protagonist was looking at the handbags and heard Tong telling Xingyunkai whether this handbag suits her. He turned back and saw Shu Tong with her new boyfriend. The girl immediately drew attention to the protagonist. 1-3. The protagonist was very surprised and even a little panicked. Sui realized that this was his ex-girlfriend and that she was at the wrong time. The protagonist replied that it was just the opposite and smiled at her. Sui approached the saleswoman and asked if they had a handbag from the spring show. The girl replied that she was the last one left. However, another client is now trying it on and pointed to the ton. She also thought that Chen would not leave her alone, and she wanted to show him that a loser like Chen was not Junkai's rival. Tong said that her birthday was coming soon and turned to Huan. The blonde looked up from the phone and was surprised because she had recently celebrated it. The girl replied that it was a birthday according to the lunar calendar, but it should be soon according to the solar calendar. The blonde man looked at her in silence. He smiled and told her to listen to him carefully. She knows that he doesn't like mercantile girls. He asked her if she was with him not only for money. The girl was very scared and tensed up. After that, Sui took the purse and snatched it from Tong. She asked for forgiveness and added that if they did not buy, then she would take it for herself. The system reported that the location of Sui Leal to the protagonist increased by 20%. The protagonist at the same time paid for his purse with his card. Its location has also increased by 20%. It was growing by leaps and bounds. The protagonist realized that this is the true power of money. Some kind of bag, and he already has 60 points in his pocket. At this rate, a couple more bags and they will achieve the desired result. The protagonist thought that the cashback could have been bigger, of course. The shop workers were talking among themselves. The girl told Xiao Lai that she didn't understand. Why are people who look like they were born with a golden spoon in their mouth so stingy towards their women? And those who look unremarkable are ready to spend such sums. The store manager told them many times that they should not be biased against guests. Appearances are deceptive. Tun heard all this and was very angry. Sui said that she and the bag and the guy were taken by a better owner. She looked at the protagonist, who was carefully examining the bags. She believed that such a big fish should not be missed. Sui hugged his hand and thanked him and called him dear. She thought he was very generous. At this time, Sui saw all this and began to cry. The girl hit Chen Yuan and said that it was too much, which surprised him. The protagonist smiled and did not understand, because this is not too much. He laughed and said they were just getting started. Immediately, Huang ran after Tong, and the system informed him that a second object had been found. Lin Shu Tong, her attractiveness rating, 7.5 points, and the disposition to the host, -10. As soon as the location parameter reaches 96 points, it will be possible to make a counterattack and she will become a fan of the owner. Reward for performing this maneuver, 10% of the system bank, 20 gain points. She approached him and asked if he was amused. She was not averse to playing along and asked where they were going next. The protagonist was surprised by her words. After the girl showed that she wanted this costume. Then another bag, why would she need two? The protagonist said that in addition to these two, everything else also needs to be wrapped and will pay with a card. The saleswoman was in shock, and Sui looked at him with loving eyes. The girl agreed with him. They will pack and deliver the selected items to the address specified by him. Sui thought that men with money were so attractive, and she had a lot of bags with things in her hands. The location of Sui Leal increased by 5%. After they went to buy expensive perfumes and her disposition increased again by 5%. Then they bought her an expensive lipstick and makeup bag and increased by 5% again. They bought a lot of clothes and the disposition continued to grow by leaps and bounds. Sui felt that this was enough. If they continued, she was afraid that all this would not fit into her apartment. He was surprised at her words and replied that it was not a problem, because he would buy her an apartment. The girl felt that it was somehow not good, because he had already spent so much money, and this was only their first meeting, but she just wanted to joke. Its location is again at 5%. The protagonist realized that he had scared her. Indeed, if he had been told that they would buy him a house worth several million, he would also have experienced some inconvenience. The protagonist said that she was in the 3rd year of the Art Institute, 21 years old, 165 centimeters, 49 kilograms. Favorite color is black. Favorite cuisine is Korean. Zodiac sign is Capricorn. Shoe size 37. Loves horror movies, but most of all is afraid to walk down the street alone at night. She was shocked by his words. The protagonist asked her if he didn't like all this, would he behave so recklessly? He asked the saleswoman if they had a member's savings card. He wanted to replenish it by 500,000. The next time this girl comes here, she needs to recommend the best to her. The girl agreed with him and asked him to wait a little. The protagonist said that this card was for her to smooth out the impression after an unsuccessful joke about buying an apartment, which scared her so much. The girl was just in shock and blushed deeply. He approached her and added that if she was uncomfortable, she could offer him something interesting in return. The girl pushed him away and thought he was a pervert. Her disposition has increased by 30% again. The saleswomen were shocked, because this guy is so plain in appearance, but so rich. Not just rich, but also very generous. He cares so much about his woman. The protagonist thought that if he had money, no matter who he was and how he behaved, he would get away with everything. The girl noted that he bought her a lot of gifts and asked why he should not think about himself. The protagonist jokingly spread his hands and said that he had no money. The girl turned around and said that now it was her turn to give him a gift. She took his hand and pulled him along. She was thinking that if she wants to catch this big fish for a long time, then she should invest in it. After that, they show us a big night city. The protagonist and Sui were choosing men's t-shirts and he was a little surprised. Then they went to the barber shop to give him a nice haircut. Then he came out and showed himself to the girl and literally sparkled all over. Its location has increased by 5%. The girl was surprised that he was so attractive. It was worth just dressing up a little. The girls in the background also thought he was very handsome. Her disposition continued to grow by leaps and bounds. 1-5. He approached her and asked her how she was. He thought it was a little strange. Chen is already an adult, but this is the first time he has encountered something like this. Fortunately, he didn't have to spend money on it. The girl approached him and replied that it was nothing strange. She thinks they look good together now. Then the girl let go of his hands. She started to leave and noted that she was so happy today. She thanked Chen. For a moment she even thought she was in love and blew him a kiss. She wanted to see him again. In total, Sui Leal's disposition was already 68%. The protagonist then returned to his home. He opened the door to the room and his friends were very surprised with his new image. The guy asked what he had been doing all day and what he was wearing. The protagonist picked up the phone and replied that he was on a date with Zhu Leal. The guy was surprised with his words, because he had not decided anything with Lin Shutong, but he had already taken up Zhu Leal. The guy with glasses replied that Zhu Leal was the first beauty of the Faculty of Arts. He was wondering what would happen to him if he was abandoned again. A friend hugged the protagonist and told him to listen to the brothers and added that he could not afford this girl. The protagonist thanked them for their advice. The protagonist wrote a message to Shutong and said that if he really hated her so much, then she wanted to remove each other from friends. Chen was happy because fortunately, these manipulations no longer work for him. If they delete each other, then he won't be able to earn extra money from her. He wrote that how could she say that, because she knows that she is special to him. The girl replied that she was with Juan not because she needed his money, but because her mother was sick. We need 50,000 yuan for treatment. Immediately, the protagonist sent her 50,000 via WeChat. She was just in shock and screamed all over the room. She barely mentioned it and he immediately transferred the money. Her friend asked who this rich man was who was throwing away such money, and she assumed that it was Huang Junkai. Shu Tong replied that to hell with this Huang, he couldn't even buy her a simple bag. This is Chen Yuan and he transferred the money to her. A friend was surprised because she just broke up with him today. She was surprised that this poor bastard had such money. Tun realized that this was her mistake and she decided to ask directly. Its location has increased by 5%. The girl asked what all this meant, where he got so much money from, and she was wondering what his relationship with Zhu Liel was and whether he bought her a bag. The girl added, was he really born with a golden spoon in his mouth after all? She wanted roast pork and sent him a smiley face. She asked if he didn't love her anymore. She wrote all this with a stony face. She was wondering why he wasn't answering and thought he had fallen asleep. The protagonist also set the status do not disturb. He thought Lin Shutong was too talkative. Zhu Liel is not so hasty in this regard. He wondered where else he could spend a lot of money on a woman. Immediately he realized that he could try with live broadcasts, and clicked on the icon in his phone. He went to the broadcast. The girl's name is Xiao Mir and she said that she will be online for just an hour, and the guys should hurry up with gifts. The protagonist went under the nickname Lone Wolf. He texted her in the chat that he wanted to be her friend. They asked him, it's not funny to him, some kind of new name with such requests. Philin added that it would cost a pretty penny, millions is far from the limit. Kakarot said that this idiot wouldn't throw 100,000. Immediately, everyone started laughing at the protagonist. Chen understood that millions is much more than the price for handbags. He realized that he was in the right place. He started sending her gifts. Immediately, Xiao Mir began thanking him for the rocket and showed him a heart. Immediately she was very surprised and was literally shocked. He started sending them an incredibly huge number of pieces, from which she blushed and did not know what to do. 1-6. All the guys shocked that the protagonist sent 100 cancer, because it's 1 million yuan. Immediately, the guy with the nickname Airplane realized that the guy had spent a lot of money. The mind realized that they had a rich man here and apologized. The charmer wrote to Sugar Daddy to punish her. Kakarot wrote that she was also nothing so he could pay her. The protagonist considered all of them snobs. He was sitting on his bed and staring at the phone, wanted to please them a little more. He pressed the rocket again and decided to send them as many as 900 pieces. A notification appeared on the stream that the lone wolf pleased with a rocket and far from one. The whole phone was in rockets that were flying forward. After that, they show us a large building and someone shouted that something incredible had happened. He went into his boss's office and said that some unknown rich man had just unbuckled 10 million yuan to Mir. He choked on the water and spat it out. The man asked, and this is definitely not some kind of fraudster. It was a lot of money and he assumed that someone was laundering money. After that, they show us the streamer's rest room. There were beautiful girls who wanted to write to a lone wolf as soon as possible. They had his ID, and they all wanted to get money from him. A bunch of girls started writing to him and saying that just a couple of rockets would cover their monthly salary. Xiao Mir was shocked. She didn't know if it was a dream and if she really had been paid 10 million. She pinched herself and it hurt. Immediately, someone started whispering to her. It was a guy with a sign on the bark. It was written that the boss said that you need to take a lone wolf into circulation and he gives an additional 10%. The girl smiled viciously, because she didn't even need to talk, as if she herself would have given such a large fish to others. The girl immediately began to thank the lone wolf. She wanted him to send her a private message and she would thank him properly. Xiao Mir wrote to him herself and asked if he was here. She said that her broadcast will last another 5 minutes. She asked him to reply to her message. The protagonist was already asleep and had all sorts of cool dreams. After that, the next day came and they show us the protagonist's dorm again. In the news in the first place was the news that the mysterious rich man spent 10 million in the shark. His identity is still a mystery. Immediately the guys shouted that someone had spent 10 million. The bespectacled man said that it was too much. In his city for such money it would be possible to buy several apartments. He wanted someone to give him money as well. The protagonist was thinking about it. Another guy said that he hopes that today he will have a dream in which he will be the richest person. The protagonist was brushing his teeth and was surprised that he spent so much money yesterday, and the system was not legal with Xiao Mir. He looked at the bound representatives of the fair sex. There were only Zhu Liel and Lin Shutong. The protagonist thought that this really requires a personal meeting. That is, all his money was wasted. He clicked on the shark icon. A lot of different girls wrote to him and everyone wanted his attention and communication. He was surprised how many messages were written to him. The guys left and waited for miracles with impatience. The bespectacled man said that he needed to go soon, because all the good places would be sorted out. The protagonist asked them what they were doing and why they didn't call him. The guy replied that they were going to class. Today was an open lesson and they wanted to enjoy the beauty of Zhao Yuki. The bespectacled man noted that he used to run ahead of them, and after the lesson he did not want to leave. Another guy asked him if Chen was coming or not. The protagonist remembered Zhao Yuki, whom he liked. 1:7. After that, they show us the university where the protagonist studies. We are shown Zhao Yuki herself. She is the chairman of the student union of Hunan University, and the dream of all guys. Everyone was already sitting at their desks and waiting for the lesson to begin. She played the piano. The chairman of the ballet troupe has a second class in fencing. Incredible appearance and a lot of talents make her an elusive dream of all guys. The protagonist was thinking that this beauty of Hunan University has been keeping to herself all this time. And in 3 years of training, no one has managed to conquer this Everest yet. The girls looking at the protagonist were just shocked and literally fell in love with him. They did not know who it was and believed that he had transferred from another group, because they had not seen him before. The protagonist also thought that since she is so impregnable, this is a great opportunity to get a good cash back. And he laughed angrily. Immediately, Tong's friend saw Chen Yuan. She noted that he had changed so much over the past couple of days. She thought he was dressing up to impress her. The girl thought that it was so, but she has Junkai. She was worried that they might quarrel because of her. Its location is 30%. She and her friend were almost already in love with him. The protagonist noted that it cost him a little to dress up and her attitude towards him improved. He considered her a really shallow woman, but he didn't care. He wondered how he could add Zhao Yuki to the system. Immediately, someone started shouting for someone to show them how he would conquer the beautiful Zhao Yuki. The protagonist drew attention to this. The guy told everyone to look carefully. He assured that she would now fall in love with him completely and irrevocably. The guy approached her and asked her for WeChat. The protagonist began to get angry, because the one he noticed was being taken away right in front of his eyes. Immediately another guy asked him what he was doing and began to get angry. The guy didn't care and he approached Zhao and said that he would like to get to know each other a little and start dating. But before he could finish, he was grabbed by the collar and he was surprised. He put it on the desk and pointed the pen, asked what this brat was up to. He ordered not to touch Zhao Yuki. It turned out that it was not a guy, but a girl. Her name is Xiaofai and she is Zhao's roommate. The guy said it was all just a misunderstanding. He wanted to join the student union. Zhao Yuki is the chairman. He just wanted to ask for advice and assured that she just misunderstood. The girl replied that she did not think so and that this was some kind of excuse to pick up a girl, and ordered him to get out of here and hit the one that he started screaming and howling. She thought it was even funny, as if a toad was showing off in front of a swan. He made her very angry, and Zhao asked her to calm down. Immediately, the protagonist approached the girls and told Zhao Yuki that he would like to add her to WeChat. Xiaofai began to get angry that another one had appeared and that there was no end to them. Zhao, surprised, turned to him. Xiaofai didn't understand what kind of hype it was today. The protagonist asked her if he could and handed him the phone. The girl thought that this guy is so brave. He is not afraid to lose face in front of the whole group. She didn't understand where he got such self-confidence from. Xiaofai noted that the protagonist is at least prettier. She asked if he also wanted to join the student union. The protagonist spread his arms and replied that he was not very interested in all these student movements. Xiaofai asked what Zhao Yuki's WeChat was for. The protagonist replied, "Isn't it obvious?" He wanted to hit on her and stretched out his hand forward. 1:8. Zhao Yuki was greatly surprised and even blushed at his words. Immediately, the whole group began to be indignant and did not believe that he was serious and believed that he was crazy. They wanted to see where he would have his confidence when he would cry after being dumped. The girl smiled at him. Zhao decided to try dating him and took out her phone. Tong's friend laughed and asked if he was not her personal dog and if there were any problems. Tun began to get angry. The protagonist understood that the desire for beauty is not alien to anyone, so why hide it? All the guys started crying and getting angry because Chen managed to get such a girl. One even noted that his goddess would get to this pig. The protagonist did not understand who said that simplicity is bad. Sometimes the most obvious is also the most effective. Who doesn't like being paid attention to? Immediately, the system reported that a new target had been found. Currently, the location of Zhao Yuki is 0. She added Chen and he was glad that everything worked. After that, the protagonist and his friends left the university, and the guys noted that the protagonist is on a roll today. Even managed to get Zhao Yuki's WeChat. Another guy mentioned that he had changed quite a lot lately. The guy added that if everything works out with Zhao Yuki, then he should ask her to introduce them to her pretty girlfriends. The protagonist also noted that he had not done anything yet. She is the most beautiful girl of the university and should not carry nonsense. Immediately, someone shouted to the protagonist that he was a smug bastard. It was that guy with his friends. He noted that Chen is smart. Chen asked if he wanted to embarrass himself even more. He could learn from this. Immediately his friends realized that he wanted to start a fight and that he was too self-confident and could start a war. Immediately he began to get very angry and wanted to kill him. He assured him that he had assured him that he remembered him. His friends held him with the last of their strength, because he had to forget what they were told at the station. If they fight again, they will be fined again. The protagonist replied and felt that he was very sorry for him. Immediately he noticed. It was Zhu Liu. She noted that he was very slow and that she had been waiting for him for a long time. She looked incredible. Immediately, all the guys got angry when they saw Zhu Liu, the first beauty of the Faculty of Arts, 6th in the ranking of beauties of the whole university, nicknamed the thunderstorm of heterosexuals. The protagonist realized that he was a fool to keep such a beauty waiting. If she would let him, he would treat her to dinner as an apology. She replied that it was not worth it. She was wondering how she looked and whether he liked her, because he bought her all these things. The protagonist replied that everything looks great on her, and this bag looks just amazing. All this was heard by Tun, who was angry. The two of them went ahead and Zhu noted that people also like it and the protagonist agreed with her. The guy who wanted to fight with the protagonist started crying, because he doesn't understand what's wrong with him. Immediately someone repeated the same thing. The guy turned around, because he thought that someone had read his thoughts. It was Shu Tong. She noted that she had been before her, and did not understand what was so and so about her. 1:09. Afterward, the girl told Chen that she had a gift for him. She stayed up late to sketch a drawing. She added that if he threw it away, she would not forgive him. The protagonist was shocked, because this is the first gift from a girl in his entire life. The girl asked lovingly if he liked it. The protagonist looked at it. After that, he lowered his head and his face seemed sullen. He understood that all this was a bait to get caught in her spider nets. As soon as he spent a couple of thousand on her, she thought out in detail how to catch him. Unfortunately for her, he is not the same as before and smiled maliciously. The girl noted that he did not look particularly happy, and thought that he did not like the gift. The protagonist rudely asked her why he needed it. The girl was embarrassed and replied that she painted him late at night if he didn't like it. Immediately, the protagonist grabbed the drawing. After that, he got close to her and said, "What if this is not so? How will she respond to him for all the gifts that he gave her?" The girl was embarrassed. She called him a scoundrel and noted that he scared her and asked her to give the drawing. The protagonist laughed and said that he would not give it up and would take it away and keep it as a family heirloom. Then he took her hand and turned to her. He replied that of course he liked her more than her gift. The girl blushed deeply. She looked at him with loving eyes. The girl realized that he was not a bad flirt. Its location has increased by 5%. The protagonist smiled maliciously. He thought that she wanted to tease him and thought that he needed her only so that he would have more money. Immediately, someone shouted Zhu Liu's name and they show us their hand. The protagonist noticed this and got ready. A certain guy broke their pair and Sui and Chen were surprised. The bespectacled man asked if she had not agreed with her best friend to make nails and he was wondering who this guy was. 1:10. The guy thought that she was making nails with him, and now she's making out in front of everyone. He thought he had money and that's why she lets herself be hugged. He's been chasing her for so long and she's never even let him take her hand. The protagonist realized that, apparently, this boy is an ardent fan of Zhu Liu. This behavior is very familiar to him. The girl viciously asked who he was at all. Whether she has a boyfriend or not, he doesn't care. Immediately, the protagonist decided to approach that guy. The protagonist introduced himself to him and asked what his name was and how long he had been so humiliated. The girl didn't understand what was going on here at all. The guy replied that his name was Wang Yu. He was also from the Faculty of Arts. He had been trying to take care of Zhu Liu for 6 months. The protagonist exhaled and considered him a lost child. The protagonist raised his bangs and said that he reminded him of someone. He once ran after a girl for 3 years. He worked 4 jobs and 8 sunsets and steamed buns. And in the end, she still chose to get into someone else's expensive car. Wang felt that this was too much. The protagonist approached him and put his hand on his shoulder and said that those who throw them motivate them to become better. A real man will definitely have a decent woman. He told him to go back to the dorm and forget about Zhu. When he succeeds, she will definitely see it and regret her choice. Van started crying and saying that he had calmed him down so much. He will definitely become stronger and earn a lot of money. Zhu did not understand at all what was going on here and whether Wang Yu was really crying. After that, the girl turned to Chen. She assured that he was just her friend and never thought that he would interfere. The protagonist turned around and said he didn't care about her past, but he thinks that she does not respect either herself or him, and right in front of her face tore up the drawing. That card he gave me yesterday. He can continue to use it, but until she understands her surroundings and learns to communicate with people, it's better for them not to see each other, and he went ahead and scattered the pieces of the drawing. The protagonist was thinking, and how is he going to put up with such an attitude towards himself, and what will she do? He'll be looking forward to it. Damn, show the tears that fell on the floor. It was the first time someone had been so condescending to her. She recalled all the scenes with Chen that they had managed to go through together. The girl started crying because of this. She started wiping away her tears and realized that he really liked her, but she screwed up so much and howled. Zhu Liu's disposition increased by 5%. The protagonist walked down the street and went down the stairs. The protagonist, looking at the system window, realized that the worse he treats a woman, the more she loves him. He has grown as a person. We've finished with Zhu Liu. It's time to get down to Zhao Yuki. He picked up the phone and realized that Zhao Yuki was watching a live broadcast and didn't know if she was also a streamer or not. 1:11. He went to the broadcast and the girl greeted everyone and introduced herself. Her specialty is music and dance. She is still only learning and interacting with them on this platform, so she asked that subscribers take care of her. The protagonist thought it was very cute. He thought she only looked so cold, but was actually quite open. He looked at the number of viewers and decided that this was not enough, and that it would not go that way. Xiaomir immediately wrote to him, who wrote to the protagonist that he was back online and that she was glad to see him and sent emoticons. The protagonist asked who she was. The girl replied that he had just given her a bunch of rockets yesterday, and today he no longer remembers her. Chen laughed and said she was joking. He asked her if she had any free time, because he needed to meet her. The girl thought he was so impatient and replied that she was very busy. The protagonist told her to forget about it. The girl asked him not to be angry and added that today she would dance especially for him. The protagonist was angry, because he understood that she still wanted to breed him for money. He had spent so much money, but still there was not even a system notification of communication with her. It would be better if he gave all this money to Chairman Zhao. Immediately, he received a notification that the presenter he was following was participating in the battle, and needed to support her. Zhao Yuki versus the mysterious girl. Xiaofei realized that it was a battle, but hoped that she didn't mind some big shot. The protagonist was looking at Chairman Zhao and he had to look at it all. It was Xiaomir. She said that she accidentally called a new girl to the battle and thought that she had the victory in her pocket. The protagonist also felt that it was quite difficult to predict the winner here. These two are in a battle. Quite an interesting set of circumstances. The battle of Zhao Yuki against Xiaomir began. The blonde thought that she shouldn't even try. Her audience is much better than her. Moreover, she is supported by such an influential person as a lone wolf. The girl saw the messages of her sycophants and even recalled the correspondence with the protagonist. From her experience of catching big fish, he must already be on the hook. Xiao's followers started giving her many different gifts. Immediately the protagonist appeared, who presented the rocket. Xiaomir was glad that a lone wolf appeared and immediately thanked him. She saw that he had not bought the rocket for her and was just shocked. Chen bought a bunch of different missiles from Zhao Yuki, from which Xiaomir was simply shocked. He gave her 1,000 rockets. Zhao and Xiaofei were just in shock and their eyes were burning. The blonde began to get angry and wondered why they didn't give her rockets. Immediately she began to whisper and the guy held a sign with the inscription that the boss demands an explanation from her. 1:12. Immediately, the blonde apologized to everyone. She explained that she had things to do and she needed to run. Her subscribers remembered that this was the same lone wolf who had spent 10 million yesterday. She turned off the broadcast and the app reported that the steamer was resting. Jimmy I started laughing at her and saying it was a shame. Little Archie noted that the lone wolf is really incredible. Made her shut up. Liu Daneng added what she said, that he was her patron, and he immediately started another one. The protagonist thought that he could give gifts to her and others and asked if she had decided to play with him. He was looking at his phone and thinking. He wanted Chairman Zhao He to spend a lot of money and she should not disappoint him. Immediately, the sharks came running to the boss again and said that a terrible thing had happened. This rich lone wolf gave a lot of money again. The boss understood what was going on and was very surprised. He didn't know. This guy was definitely not some oil tycoon. After that, they show us the streamer's restroom again. The girls were discussing the protagonist. The girl with blue hair said that the richest lone wolf transferred 10 million to the girl who played the piano. The blonde thought that he was in a musical mood today. The redhead shouted to Xiao to carry her triangle and her. The other one shouted to capture her Sanu too. After that evening came and the streets were a little empty. Xiao told Zhao to watch, because her broadcast today is in the first place in all trends. She has become popular and will be an internet celebrity. Zhao, on the other hand, was just in shock and very embarrassed. She thought about it. To make men happy on the internet, she will not say that this is a particularly attractive prospect. Career is the most important thing for a woman. It should be independent both financially and in all other aspects. Xiao agreed with her and asked her not to teach her anymore. Immediately she asked her to tell honestly if she knew this rich man who showered her with gifts. The girl turned away and replied that he had told her 1,000 times that he had not. She may or may not believe. Her friend asked her not to be angry, because she was just very curious. But Zhao understood that he really sent too much and therefore he needed to thank her. Xiao looked at her with surprise. She thought about it, and who just said that he was not amused by such a prospect. Said one thing, did another. Immediately, Zhao screamed and Xiao was scared. She turned around and asked what it was. She turned to a friend and said that she probably knew who it was and showed the phone. She realized that it was Chen Yuan, because he was recorded in her contacts 1-1. The story
13. After Zhao tells that the son of a wealthy man, always the best clothes and the best food, but by nature he is quite modest, and therefore he always pretended to live a completely ordinary life. Having received a better education, he realized that he did not want to be the object of everyone's attention and wanted to live freely. One day he met a girl he fell in love with and decided to get her, no matter what it took, but as an ordinary person. Zhao believed that everything was like that, and the surprised Xiao thought that she had read the novels again. The girl added that he had been surrounded by all the best since childhood. Pretending to be a simple person must have been quite difficult. Her friend waved her hand and told her to go wash and sleep. The girl replied with a denial and that she should thank him from the bottom of her heart. After that, the protagonist's phone started ringing. The protagonist was drying himself after taking a shower and was surprised. It was a new notification from Zhao Yuki. She asked him if he would have any free time in the next few days. The protagonist replied that judging by these words, the chairman wanted to invite him on a date and assured that he could at any time. The girl would like to invite him to eat and asked what kind of cuisine he prefers. Chen replied that he wanted to go eat crayfish because it was his favorite delicacy. The girl was glad and agreed, adding that they would meet tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the school gates. The protagonist, wiping his head, was surprised because she didn't even ask where he had so much money from and just invited him to dinner. He wanted to see what she was up to. After that, they show us a busy street. The protagonist was riding a moped and singing a song under his nose. He slowed down near a luxury Audi car where a certain man was standing. He asked the protagonist if he was waiting for someone. Chen asked if he was waiting. The man replied that he was here to pick up his girlfriend. After that, we are shown Zhao, who looked around in surprise. The protagonist saw her and blushed a little. The man started telling him not to even think about her. To be with such a girl, you need a lot of money. Rather, he has a better chance. Chen was angry about it. Immediately Zhao saw the protagonist. She saw him as a handsome prince in a white suit and on a chic racing motorcycle. She thought he was a real handsome man and ran to him. The man continued to say that when he can afford to drive a car like his, the protagonist will have chances. Immediately, the girl sat down behind him and even Chen was surprised. The man was just in shock and even dropped his cigar. And the protagonist and Zhao went ahead. He looked at them and just didn't understand what was going on. He fell to the floor and started crying. After all, he has earned so much money, and what is all this for? 1-14. The girl imagined that she was riding a sports motorcycle. Chen was sitting in front of her in a chic suit, and she was in a wedding dress and rose petals were flying on them. She had loving eyes and she blushed a lot. Immediately, the protagonist told her that they were in place and the girl seemed to wake up. The girl got up from the moped and they drove up to the place where crayfish are sold. After they went inside, Chen warned that these dishes are quite spicy and you need to eat carefully. The girl sat down at the table, and the protagonist wiped the table a little, from which she was very surprised. Zhao blushed even more, because even in such an unremarkable institution, she does not forget about manners. A really decent man. There is one peculiarity in communication. The more he is disposed to a person, the more gracious he shows. He's really well-mannered. He gave her napkins and wanted her not to get her hands dirty, and the girl thanked him. Then he put on gloves and started eating crayfish. The girl thought that these must be the smallest crayfish he had ever eaten. She was thinking that he was so rich, but he was having dinner with her in such an unremarkable place. He just didn't want her to feel pressured. Zhao thought that he was really a beautiful, delicate flower. She imagined him in an expensive print suit and that he was eating big lobsters. Its location has grown by 10%. The protagonist did not understand what was going on at all and even dropped one cancer. After that, the girl pulled the cancer meat out of the shell. She held it out to him and asked him to say ah, and the protagonist was surprised. She thanked Chen and wanted him to let her peel a shrimp for him and handed it over. The protagonist was in maximum surprise. She started feeding him and immediately the protagonist's ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend Juan looked in there. She was very surprised. She even thought that she had problems with her eyesight because Zhao Yuki feeds Chen Yuan shrimp. She was angry and bit her fingers because first Su Liu, now Zhao Yuki, she did not understand what was wrong with him. She turned to Juan and said that there were too many people here and suggested that he go to another place. He realized that she meant her and replied that there were a lot of people she knew and the girl was very surprised, and he hugged her. They went ahead and Juan said that he likes to eat in crowded places. The protagonist has already finished his portion and a shadow appeared behind him. It was Huang. He dropped the paper and realized it was Chen Yuan. He said there were 500,000 here and asked him to vacate his seat and give it to him. 1:15. After that, they show us a table with shrimp and crayfish. The protagonist didn't know if he was crazy, because doing something like that doesn't make him more courageous. Juan asked if he didn't have enough money. He added that he thought it was enough for him to move. Immediately we are shown Zhao, who grabbed her purse and was very angry. The protagonist noticed that she was very angry and literally burning with fire. Chen understood that he was trying to provoke him, and did not understand why she was angry. Zhao cursed this cool guy who came out of nowhere and ruined her perfect date. Juan was surprised that he didn't have enough and then wanted to give more and reached for his wallet. Immediately, someone put his hands on the money. It was the waiter who asked if Juan could give him money, and he would put them a new table. Juan was very angry and grabbed the guy by the collar. He did not want a new table, namely the one at which the protagonist was sitting. Immediately Zhao hit him with her purse that he lost his tooth. The protagonist looked at her and Zhao lifted the bag over her head and said that she did not do it. Immediately, a huge woman appeared behind the protagonist and Zhao. She said Huang Zhengkai is a juvenile scumbag. He wears her clothes, eats her food and drives her car. So she also has fun with girls for her own money. This woman was very formidable and very angry that even the protagonist was scared and thought that she scared him to death. Huang with a bruise asked why Xiaoqing why she was here. The woman shouted that if she hadn't been here, she would never have found out that he was tumbling with another behind her back. She thought he was just an animal. Juan immediately approached her, made a cute face and said how could he be with other girls? Everything he has, it's all thanks to her, and therefore he can't betray her. Xu Tong was watching the whole scene. Wang grabbed Tong by the hair and shouted that it was all her. She decided that she could seduce him. He thought she was unscrupulous. The girl screamed in surprise. The girl started crying and said it was nonsense, because it's not like that. He was the one courting her and he said he didn't have a partner either. Wang hit Tong and told that lying girl to shut up. She fell to the floor and didn't know what to say. Juan was very angry and asked what she was looking at him. He assured her that it was all incredibly infuriating and wanted to hit her hard. Immediately, the protagonist grabbed his hand and he was surprised. Chen was angry and noted that he was hitting women and asked if he really wanted to embarrass himself like that. Lin Shutong's favorability increased by 20% and she thought that Chen Yuan still loved her. Its location grew incredibly fast and immediately the system reported that the location of the linked object number 2 Lin Shutong had reached 95 points. The counterattack was successful. Related object number 2 Lin Shutong spent 50,000 yuan. Cash back for the personal needs of the owner amounted to 5,000. Lin Shutong becomes a fan of the host. 20 gain points were received and a certain flash occurred and the protagonist was very surprised. 1:16. After that, we are shown the statistics and characteristics of Chen Yuan. His strength, 9 points. Physical characteristics, 9. Spiritual strength, 10. Dexterity, 9. Wisdom, 10. Gain points, 20. The protagonist was thinking about using 10 points on the physical characteristics attribute. Immediately he twisted Juan's arm. The blonde man began to shout that he was in pain and asked to let go. Juan grabbed one of the bottles. He raised it over his head and shouted that he decided to show off and that the protagonist died. Chen looked at him with cold eyes. He quickly hit the bottle, and then directly into Juan and he flew back. He was on his knees and Chen said that there was nothing wrong with being kept by a woman, but at the same time beating women is already bestiality. Huang was very angry because of the humiliation. He reached for his knife from his pocket. Zhao shouted to the protagonist to be careful. Juan was very angry and grabbed the knife and flew forward. Immediately there was a certain flash. The protagonist grabbed his arm and twisted it so that he dropped his knife. Immediately he decided to throw it over his back and lifted it above him. A strong blow thundered. Juan was lying on the floor and lost consciousness. All the people were shocked because they did not expect such an outcome. They got up from their desks to watch, but girls thought Chen was attractive. And the guys laughed that Wang got punched in the face. Shu Tong sat on the floor and looked at the protagonist, and Chen walked forward. Immediately she grabbed his leg and confessed that she was wrong. She asked him to give him another chance. She wanted to start all over again. The protagonist didn't even look at her, but listened. He asked her if it was the same Chen Yuan who dragged her 10 kilometers to the emergency room at 3 in the morning. Chen Yuan, who had been saving money for 6 months to buy her a mobile phone, which, by the way, she did not like, because it was not the latest model. The one who always knew how frivolous and vain she was, but believed that she would notice him. He was looking at her, but then he turned around and said that Chen Yuan had been dead for a long time and she had made her choice. And the girl continued to sit on the floor and cry. She was just in shock and understood who she had abandoned and what she had lost. After Zhao and Chen went outside and stood facing each other, the protagonist apologized to Chairman Zhao. Today everything is so chaotic that they did not have the opportunity to spend time together normally. The girl asked him not to call her that, just Kiki. She assured me that everything was fine today. Besides, she had a chance to see him from the other side. She thought that the further away, the more mysterious he seemed. The protagonist also said that next time he treats. She recalled all the events of today and believed that she had a premonition that he would still surprise her. And she also smiled maliciously. After that, they show us the night city. 1:17. After Shu Tong ran home and her friend met her, the girl was all in tears and the friend asked why she was without an umbrella because there was a terrible rain. She was crying a lot and wanted to tell me something about Chen Yuan. A friend suggested that she found out that he had given Zhao Yuki a whole million on the broadcast yesterday. She thought he didn't look like he had a lot of money. She also noted that Tun was soaked all over and asked why she did not stay to wait under some kind of awning. Tong was immediately surprised and screamed violently in rage. She asked who said it and if it was true. The girl replied that Zhao Yuki Xiaofai's neighbor had let it slip. This information then spread throughout the women's dormitory, and she found out. The girl was in shock. She began to sob even more and blush. She remembered Chen Yuan and only because of her money. She screamed a lot and some people thought it was a scream like from some horror movie. After that, the protagonist played on the phone and won. His friend thought that this simply could not be. 18 wins in a row and he thought Chen was on a roll today. The bespectacled man asked him to admit that the protagonist is as successful a sports player and all this time just didn't want to tell them. The protagonist could not have thought that after distributing 20 points of gain, even playing games would become easier, unexpected and pleasant. The protagonist told them that it was nonsense and that he was just lucky. Another friend asked why he shouldn't become a streamer. He'll pull them all up as soon as he starts earning millions. The protagonist told them to play, and he would go to the shower. After that, he looked in the mirror and realized that the effect of the gain points was really obvious. Just an incredible figure. He wondered if he would call himself an Asian Sirkin Balat. Then it would not be too loud to say something like that. Immediately he thought that Sirkin Balat was not so cool after all. He has a system. He felt that he now has a perfect body, and it is necessary not to be cheap with girls. Immediately, a friend shouted to Chen to get out of the toilet as soon as possible, because his phone was ringing and he was surprised. The protagonist came to him and was surprised that Zulil was calling him so late. He thought that she had come up with something else and would try to fool him again. He answered the phone and asked what he owed her. The girl cried and said that she didn't know what to do at all and he was surprised. After that, they show us a busy street. Then a huge pile of clothes. Zhu was sitting in her room and crying into the phone that she didn't know what to do at all. She asked him if he could lend her 500,000 yuan. 1-18. She said that her father is addicted to gambling and spends a lot of money that he got out of there literally in his underpants. They had a fairly well-off family, but in an instant they were at the bottom and they had to borrow money. The man was telling the guy to give him 2 more days and he would definitely return everything to him. She assured that she was not mercantile, but she just needed to pay off her debts. The protagonist also told her to give the card number. The girl was very surprised by his words. She quickly started dictating the card number to him. Immediately, she received a text message that 5 million yuan had been replenished to her bank account. The girl started counting zeros. She was very surprised when she saw 5 million in her account. The protagonist joked that he just made a mistake by 1 0. Immediately, the girl began to scream violently, which greatly surprised Chen. Zulil's disposition began to grow rapidly, so that a lot of system windows appeared in front of the protagonist and he was surprised. She told him that she would definitely repay him with something. After that, they show us that Zulil's disposition was already 94% and a little bit was missing. The protagonist was surprised and did not understand how. It's still not enough. He was thinking about whether it was worth acting directly. Immediately he realized that the one who first admits that he needs another person is in a vulnerable position. In other words, he loses. When 2 armies collide, energy decides. If the enemy does not dare to act, force him. The Art of War by Chen Yuan. After that, they show us the protagonist storm again and that the next day has come. The protagonist and his friends were standing near the men's dormitory. The protagonist told the bespectacled man that it couldn't go on like this anymore and he had to pick up a girl for himself. Immediately, someone called Chen Yuan. The protagonist turned back in surprise. Standing behind him was Shu Tong, who said that she had prepared lunch for him and offered to go to class together, handing him a bag of food. The guy shouted that he had whistled on the mountain or something. Why is Lin Shu Tong wearing his shoes? Immediately, another girl said that she had also prepared food for him. All three of his friends were just shocked and angry. It was Zhu Liu who suggested that he was probably tired of this table food. She made him porridge with sea products. Zhu and Shu Tong met eyes. They were very angry at each other and realized that now they are rivals. Immediately, a girl also turned to the protagonist. The protagonist wondered who else was there. The guys shouted in one voice that there was another girl, and wanted him to leave him at least one. 1:19. It was Zhao who looked just shocked and said that she had brought him beef noodles. Shu Tong wondered what Zhao Yuki was doing here. Both girls tensed. They saw a formidable opponent in front of them. They thought that this was the strength of the second beauty of the university. She has such an oppressive aura. The protagonist accepted her bag of food and asked how she knew that he liked beef noodles. The girl replied that yesterday, when they were eating crayfish, she realized that he liked spicy. She was glad that she knew where to cook great beef noodles. The protagonist said that he was very pleased to be taken care of and thanked Tsitsi. He himself reflected that he did not expect anything less from Chairman Zhao. She is so attentive that she could understand what he likes. This is its advantage. The girl made a sly face and said that it was not worth it. Breakfast is the most important meal. Of course, you need to take into account the preferences of the person you are cooking for. And when you don't expect it, it's doubly pleasant, and Zhu and Tong were embarrassed. They imagined that she literally demolished them in the boxing ring with her words and actions. She also remembered that she had a gift and gave it to him. As a thank you, the protagonist was surprised, because this is a brand new iQOO 15 Pro Max. Chen was surprised that the chairman was giving him a gift, and even a phone of the newest model. The guys were shocked that she was also giving him gifts, and they thought that she simply couldn't stand it. Zhu and Tong were shocked, because it's more than 10,000 yuan. They didn't know she was so well off. She simply threw Zhu onto Tong's back through herself and thereby finished off. The protagonist replied that it was not worth the expense. The girl replied that he had spent more on her. She didn't have much money, but it was from the bottom of her heart. The protagonist realized that he had to accept the gift and they went for a walk. After that, they show us another hostel and a street. Shu Tong was sad, because she just wanted to go back to Chen Yuan and didn't know why it was so difficult. She was in despair, because only a couple of days had passed, and then Zhao Yuki showed up. After Zhu turned to her and told her whether it was Lin Shu Tong and added that they needed to talk. The girl paid attention to her. Immediately, she started yelling at her and saying that they had nothing to talk about. She thought she was an insidious woman. It's all because of her. Zhu replied that of course. She approached her and told her that they needed to unite. Tun didn't understand why she had come so close. She was surprised and asked what she was talking about at all. Zhu replied that they needed to unite to face a common enemy together, Zhao Yuki. 1:20. The protagonist was looking at his new phone and was surprised. He thought Zhao Yuki was really amazing. She gave him such an expensive phone, and it costs more than 10,000 yuan. He was looking straight at her while she was smiling. The girl turned around and asked in surprise what was wrong with the phone. The protagonist smiled and replied that he was incredibly cool. The system said that Zhao Yuki's infatuation is now 40%. He understood that if the level of favor was not so insignificant, he would even think that she was in love with him. Shen realized that she was really smart, and her methods were quite sophisticated. She lets the prey think that she is the hunter, like a little fish chasing the light to eat it, but it's a trap. The protagonist realized that he needed to find a way to accelerate progress. Immediately, a new message came to his phone. It was Xiao Mir. The girl wrote that they had not been able to arrange a meeting last time. She's just a little afraid of new acquaintances, but that doesn't mean she doesn't want to meet her at all. The protagonist was surprised, because she didn't even send him a couple of photos. She thought she had found a rich fool. Immediately he received a new notification. It was a certain dragon emperor. He greeted me and told me that he was one of Xiao Mir's sponsors. They had an interesting group where there were materials for all streamers and asked if he would like to join. The protagonist realized that this is the legendary chat. Immediately, Chen entered the chat pictures of interesting content and chatterbox. Immediately, everyone was surprised that the same lone wolf entered their chat. The protagonist greeted everyone. They were surprised that this is the same guy who threw the girls a few million in a couple of days. The protagonist replied that it was nonsense, and that he was having a little fun. Someone wrote that since this is nonsense for him, then the protagonist is definitely incredibly rich. He has a little business, and asked if he was interested. The protagonist thought that these rich guys wanted to test him and decided to play. The protagonist wrote that if you need help, you should write in private messages. The breeze wrote that he had a villa that he would like to live in and asked if he was interested in something like this. The protagonist asked where she was. The breeze replied that it was in the Jiang district with a view of the river. He typed the coordinates into the map and they show us that area. The protagonist was a little confused because this is a rich area. One villa will cost tens of millions. The protagonist wrote that he was just looking for something similar. You need to store all the junk somewhere. He assured me that he would look tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. The protagonist went straight to Zhao. After that, they show us a large and expensive house. The bald man was surprised that the protagonist was really interested and thought they were wrong. He told the Dragon Emperor that he was not a scammer and that he really had money. The Emperor replied that whether they exist or not, they will find out only with time. In any case, even if he is really rich, they will have a rich friend. They are both in the black. He also told Baldy to reset the location of the protagonist to him. A little later, he wanted to request his biography. After that, the protagonist walked with Zhao and on. The breeze wrote him the address of the villa, Jiang District, House 8. He put the phone away, looked ahead and thought how much her favor would increase if he gave her a villa. 1:21. After that, they show us the area of the rich. The protagonist and Zhao got out of the taxi and the girl asked in surprise why they were here. They show us the same big house where the bald man and the blonde stood. Immediately, a very unfaithful man greeted the protagonist and apologized that he had not sent a car for him. The protagonist replied that everything was fine. The bald man thought about it. Chen looked as ordinary as possible, but that girl behind him is so refined. He thought that Chen was the son of some rich family. He felt that it would be quite difficult for them to agree today. The bald man stretched out his hand and said that he himself was from Huanyuan. He had a small business, but recently, due to financial problems, he was thinking about selling this villa. He invited them to come inside. He wanted them to take a look. The building area is 500 square meters. The area used is 2,000. Design project of famous designers. All the furniture is imported from Italy. Going out on the balcony. He wanted them to just take a look, all according to Feng Shui. If it wasn't for money problems, he would have wanted to be buried here. Zhao was surprised that Chen Yuan was going to buy this house. All this splendor is worth tens of millions. The protagonist went out to his balcony and noted that the view was not bad. He also said that a man cannot strain so much and just say how much he wants for the house. The man decided to mention that he needed money quite urgently, and before him there were several other buyers who liked the villa very much. He is ready to give the house for 50 million, but it is necessary to leave an opportunity for bidding, so he overestimated a little. He said the average price was 60 million and blushed a little. The protagonist exhaled and the bald man thought, based on his reaction, that it was too expensive and that rich kids were not easy to fool. The protagonist replied that since there are only 60 million, he agrees. The man was surprised that he agreed so easily and simply. The blonde didn't understand what was going on. She didn't know if some people really thought it was cheap. The man was angry, because if he had known earlier, he would have said 70, no, not even 80 million. The protagonist asked Sitsi what she thought and whether it was worth buying. Zhao didn't understand why he was asking her, because she had nothing to do with it. The protagonist approached her and replied because he was buying it for her. The man was surprised that it was a gift for 60 million and realized that his wallet was just incredibly huge. The girl was shocked that he was giving her 60 million. She believed that no matter how rich he was, there must be some measure in all this. She thought it was too much 60 million. It's not 60 yuan. She suspected that this was some kind of trap and did not know what he would do with her later for such gifts. She imagined everyone and was very scared. 1:22. The girl replied that it was somehow not very good and she could not accept such a gift. He took her hand and asked her to listen to him. The protagonist explained that recently there have been certain restrictions on the part of the state, and there are too many real estate registered on it. He thought that one villa could be issued for her. Besides, he hoped to give her a house. The girl was just in shock and blushed deeply. The girl thought that it was possible to register real estate only in the name of a spouse. She didn't know if Chen Yuan felt that way about her. She imagined how they were already married and blushed deeply. He asked her what their relationship was. Her or his, he didn't feel the need to separate. Zhao Yuki's location increased by 10%. Immediately she turned away and her location increased by another 10%. It was growing very fast and its location was already 90%. The protagonist also believed that his acting abilities were getting better day by day, and Oscar was crying for him. After the girl poked her finger at the man, the blonde bulged her melons forward and asked the boss when he would give him one. The man started to worry and laughed. In fact, he thought he couldn't afford it. The protagonist held the card on the device. Chen said that a deposit of 10 million, the rest after signing the documents. The man agreed with him and said that he would do everything necessary. He would need a couple of days. Then they got into a taxi and drove off. The man said goodbye to him and wished him a good dog and assured him that he was glad to meet him. He noted that no matter how rich he is, he still takes a taxi, all in order to become like ordinary people. Indeed, the richer a person is, the more modest he is. He thought the protagonist was a great role model, and the blonde thought that he was still so young and wondered if he needed a secretary, and was already in love with him. Afterward, the protagonist and Kiki rode in a taxi on the way back. He noted that Xiao Yuki's location had already reached 90%. After she becomes his fan, the 70 million spent on her will turn into his personal 7 million. Another 10 million was spent on broadcasts. Combined with power-up points, this is a wonderful reward. The girl thought that from her experience of reading novels, he could say that the next step would be a declaration of love. She already had loving eyes. She thought Chen Yuan was so generous. She was sure he would be a good father. She imagined him giving her a diamond ring the size of a quail egg. She wanted a wedding ceremony in Milan or the Alps. She was thinking what they would call their child, and if they had grown old together, then he would still love her. She imagined it all and looked happy. Immediately they were told that they were on the spot and the girl came to her senses. He came to their college. The girl got out of the car, and the protagonist was still sitting inside. She asked him if he was coming. Chen replied that his roommates invited him to play in an internet cafe. The car left quickly and he only managed to say goodbye to her. The girl was surprised and did not understand where her declaration of love was. 1:23. After the taxi arrived where it was needed and the protagonist got out of it, he went inside and asked his friends how they were playing. The friend replied that he was late because they had already lost the game. He added that they lost because he wasn't here and old Zhu was just a noob. Zhu was surprised that he wanted to put all the blame on him. He told Chen to come through soon and that they had left this computer for him. The protagonist told them not to worry and added that Daddy would solve everything. He came up to the cash register and said that he had 20 cards, 4 packs of cigarettes and damn bottles of red tea. Zhu was also standing there, who was surprised when she saw the protagonist. Chen asked Zhu Liu what she was doing here. The girl was surprised that she didn't tell him, but her father has an internet cafe. This is one of them. Thanks to him, her family's debts were repaid. She wanted to treat Chen Yuan. She decided to make him a regular customer with no restrictions on visiting. The protagonist was confused and replied that it was not necessary. Immediately someone knocked down the door, from which the protagonist was very scared. We are shown a certain bandit with a bat who turned to Zhu and asked when her father would return the money to them. Zhu replied that she gave them 50,000 and they came to demand money again. The bandit came up to the table, hit him with a bat and replied that she had given 50,000 interest. 15 million have already run up. The girl shouted that it was blackmail and no longer climbs into any gate. The guy grabbed her and told her to stop showing her teeth here. If she's not going to give away 15 million, then she should go with him. She is a beauty and many customers will like her in his nightclub. He will work for a year or two and laughed a lot. The protagonist immediately flew up to them and grabbed the bandit by the hand and ordered him to get out before he finally got angry. Zhu was glad that Chen had become her savior. The bandit did not understand what he was saying there and ordered his henchmen to kill him. Forgopnik immediately ran at him. The protagonist glared at everyone. He immediately kicked the main bandit. His friends saw all this and were shocked that he hit with a U-turn and did not understand when Chen learned this. It was like he was in a computer game. The guys understood that he was so strong, as if they were watching a frame from a movie in real life. No wonder they lost without him. After that, the main bandit was already bruised and said that Chen was lucky today, but next time he should not be seen. The other did not want to anger the protagonist and just wanted to run away rather. Immediately, Zhu hugged the protagonist and thanked him for saving her. She was so scared. Immediately, the system reported that Zhu Liu's location had reached 95%. Related object number 1 spent 5 million yuan, and Chen gets 530,000. Zhu Liu becomes a fan of the host, and he received 5 gain points. He was happy about it. He wanted to see where the power-up points could be spent this time. Immediately, we are shown Shu Tong, who noticed that Chen and Zhu were hugging. She shouted to Zhu Liu that she was lying trash, which surprised her. She pointed her finger at her and shouted that they had agreed to unite, and she was here seducing Chen Yuan. They began to swear among themselves and the protagonist told the system to spend all the points on dexterity. Immediately, the guys began to calm the girls down, while the protagonist just ran away from this fuss. 1:24. After that, they show us a large sports field where there were a lot of people. The protagonist understood that Lin Shutong and Zhu Liu had already finished. It remained to wait for Xiao Yuki. He wanted to find a new girl. Otherwise he would be left without fans. Immediately, someone tapped Chen on the back and apologized. She asked if he could step back a little, because the protagonist is blocking the way. It was a beautiful girl and she said that this sports ground belongs to their club. Now there will be short distance running competitions. He should just step aside a little. The protagonist was surprised. He found her a harsh, but very attractive girl. He held out his phone and said that of course he would leave if she gave him her WeChat. The girl was surprised. Immediately, someone shouted at them to stop and asked what they were doing there. A guy stood in front of her and assured her that he was her boyfriend, and he had better get rid of such thoughts as soon as possible and get out of here. The protagonist also thought that this guy looked familiar. He recalled how this guy had beaten the protagonist earlier and called him a worthless idiot and asked if Chen thought he was worthy of Sao Royo. He was constantly beating him up and beating him up. He also pressed his foot to the ground. This guy asked Chen if he saw himself in the mirror at all and told him not to even think. The protagonist got very angry and even tensed up. He thought that the world was small. The system was immediately activated. The girl's name is Yi Jiang. She is 19 years old. Attractiveness index 8.2. Location to the protagonist 5. The fourth object is successfully connected. As soon as the location in relation to the host reaches 95 points, the host will receive a cashback of 10% and 22 gain points. The protagonist laughed, because 22 points gain was already interesting for him. After the judge said that the competition would begin and therefore all participants should get ready. Her boyfriend got on the line and was ready. He looked straight at Jian and was all sparkling. The girl shouted that her boyfriend was the best. The bespectacled man next to me didn't understand why there was another person behind the track. The protagonist also wanted to participate in the races. Immediately, the judge pulled out a pistol and fired upwards. Everyone quickly ran forward and began to support the runners. This guy was ahead of everyone and he mocked his opponents. He thought that everyone was just useless insects. Immediately, the protagonist began to pick up speed and catch up with him. Someone overtook the guy and he was surprised. He thought it was impossible to run so fast. It was the protagonist who ran with a stony face. 1 minute 25. He was running at such a high speed that smoke and steam were flying away from him. The protagonist wanted Lai Yong to look carefully, because now he would lose to him in the field where he seemed to have no equal. Lai Yong started getting very angry. He shouted so that Chen wouldn't underestimate him. He removed a certain seal and used a golden left leg. He strained so much that the veins appeared on his leg. Lai Yong raised his head and said that he had no idea who he was and what he was. But now he decided to show him who the king and god were here. Immediately Lai Yong began to turn around and look for the protagonist. He did not understand where he had gone. The protagonist ran past him and told Lai to work better with his feet and not with his tongue. And he was scared when Chen ran past him at high speed. Lai Yong didn't understand how he had already overtaken him, because it had only been a couple of seconds. He was very angry that the protagonist was running forward. Chen thought that Lai Yong had devoted himself to hard training for several years, but he couldn't compare to the buns of his system. The presenter spoke into the microphone so that the audience would watch carefully. He believed that the protagonist was literally flying and did not understand what speed he had developed. Even their permanent champion could not withstand the onslaught. In just 50 seconds, he had covered the entire distance. The protagonist ran to the finish line and took down the ribbon. He Jing dropped her water bottle. She was shocked that Lai Yong lost for the first time in running. People started throwing up the protagonist and congratulating him. The presenter said that now they are watching the birth of a new champion. He broke all previous records. He didn't know if he should start doubting that he was even human. They know absolutely nothing about him. He was not even declared a participant in this competition. Immediately, a huge guy who was a coach approached the protagonist. He said that Chen had demonstrated such extraordinary abilities that it was impossible to imagine. He noted that if the protagonist is interested in developing in this field, he offers him to join the national athletics team. Lai Yong started crying and shouted to the coach that he should have told him, not Chen. The protagonist apologized and replied that he was not interested. He Jiang appeared, who noted that she hadn't even noticed how courageous the protagonist was. Its location has increased by 5%. Lai Yong immediately took the water bottle from her and asked what she was thinking about. The girl timidly replied that she was not talking about anything. She was just a little worried about him. Her disposition increased by another 10%, and the protagonist smiled maliciously. 1 minute 13. After Zhao tells 1 minute 26. After that, they show us the sorority house. Kiki was leaving and her friend asked where she was going. The girl realized that she did not know and told that Chen had given her a house. The friend started screaming and asked again. Kiki agreed, and so today they are going to look at the house together. She added that he bought it for 60 million. You need to look at real estate prices in the area. She also assured that if the old man who sells the house decides to back down, she will simply destroy it. Chen Yuan said that everything that belongs to him is hers. A friend thought that fools were lucky and she was jealous. She grabbed the phone and was just in shock. A friend told Kiki to stop bragging and look at the phone, and didn't even understand why she was jealous at all, and Kiki was surprised. The news has emerged that the protagonist is the main womanizer of Hunan University. The girls looked at each other and were very surprised, not even believing what they were seeing. At this time, the guy showed the protagonist the news and laughed. And Chen was angry about all this. He didn't understand what these things were. It was written that he was just a boy who liked to spend money, and Chen believed that this was slander. He thought that lately he has been popular for this reason, and someone does not like it, and he was wondering who it was. After we are shown a certain house and a bird. A group of guys were discussing the news and did not know whether they had published it or not. 3 guys were sitting at the computer. The bespectacled man said that this article was published and ranked first in the ranking, and this is the most popular news. The other guy started laughing because he thought Chen's reputation was pretty tarnished. He wanted to see who would like him now. Immediately, Lai Yong appeared behind them, who asked what they were doing here with the curtains closed in the middle of the day. All 3 of them were very scared. The fat man noted that they didn't hear anyone come in and scare them at all. The bespectacled man hastened to explain to Yang that recently a guy named Chen Yuan has been behaving very arrogantly, and therefore they want to teach him a lesson. Yang watched the news and realized that this was the guy who got in without an application and won the competition, and that his name was Chen Yuan. He began to remember and wondered if this was the same loser he had beaten earlier. Immediately, an evil smile appeared on his face and he only said the name of the protagonist. Jan said that he knows him. They were together in high school. He's been such a sycophant since childhood. He knows a lot about him. He also noted that Lovelace is not very suitable for him. Rather, a sycophant who clings to girls with a death grip. Immediately, the fat man gave Jan a chair and asked him to sit down and talk. He also noted that it sounds intriguing. Molesting girls. A busy story can come out of this. Another asked Jan to speak more slowly, especially about sucking up. The bespectacled man grabbed the paper and said that he would write everything down and post it, and laughed a lot. Then Yang smiled maliciously and thought that since Chen had won the competition and the coaches liked him, he would do everything to make sure that there was no wet spot left of his reputation. After that, the news on the site was updated and supplemented. There was information that the main womanizer and scumbag of Hunan University, Chen Yuan, he has connections with a huge number of girls, objectifies girls, and does not shy away from using physical force against them. And the classmates were told to keep their eyes open, which is an even bigger sensation. The people who dealt with him confirmed that they were harassed by Chen Yuan and were forced to enter into a relationship with him under pressure. Such behavior cannot be called adequate. They also have information that during his high school years, Chen Yuan had a reputation for sucking up. He was stalking 100 girls and boys. All those who were subjected to such treatment had their academic performance and health deteriorated. All those who read it were just shocked and couldn't believe it. After that, we are shown a certain man who hit the phone hard with his hand and shouted that this was too much. It doesn't go through any gates. He will not allow such a thing to happen at his university. He will conduct a personal investigation and find out everything. If this is true, then he will kick Chen out of here. And his assistant was crying because he hit his phone, and he just bought it. 1:27. After that, we are shown that Kiki tells us that Chen Yuan from Hunan University of Humanities is a special person. Most of all, he hates it when girls suffer. He comes from a wealthy family, but is a fair and selfless person who is always ready to help those in need. Chen said that he hates scum who beat women. Every day, at nightfall, he turns into a hero and punishes the villains. Powerful and mysterious, it protects a city full of desires and sin. Kiki said she thinks the protagonist is a real hero. We are shown 2 guards. One of them asked if she was exaggerating too much. Another asked on what grounds she came to this conclusion. The girl clearly replied that she thinks so at the expense of female intuition. The head did not know whether to believe her words. His assistant replied that she was the chairman of the Zhao Yuki Student Union. She's a little weird, but on the whole she has no reason to lie. He thought that Chen Yuan was probably a normal guy. The man wanted to interview other classmates. He just didn't believe it. He was angry because he believed that there was no one more perfect than him. After that, we are shown the university itself. They show us the protagonist's ex-girlfriend. 2 guards came up to her. They greeted her and said that they needed to ask her a couple of questions about her classmate Chen Yuan, and she should go with them. After that, we entered the building and were in the office. Tong Tong cried a lot and said that Chen Yuan was a good person. They just didn't suit each other. She loves money and has 7 Fridays for the week. Chen Yuan didn't choose her and she understands everything. She apologized for getting so emotional, but Chen Yuan is a really good person. When she thinks about him, her heart breaks. She also asked for another napkin. The guard handed her a napkin and asked her what she liked about Chen Yuan, but he rejected it. But she still thinks he's a good person. The girl replied that it served her right. She doesn't deserve it. He treated her so well, he never did anything wrong. He just doesn't love her anymore. The director was surprised and left the room sad. After that, he decided to smoke a little and exhaled. He stood at the window and wondered if he had made a mistake. Those people on the forum are just trying to slander a good person. He didn't know if Chen was really a good man. Then he saw a girl and a man and asked what kind of strike it was. The director came out to them and greeted the man. He said that he was the director of the university and asked what brought them here. Generosity, injustice, or the highest benefits. The girl said her name was Zulil from the Faculty of Arts. They are here to support Chen Yuan. The man added that a few days ago, the protagonist helped their family a lot. The director was shocked that Chen Yuan was also present here. 1:28. After that, the two went ahead and the director wondered if he had made a mistake about the protagonist again. He felt that he needed to take another look at the forum. The girl wrote that if Chen Yuan is a ladies' man, then she can rap one. After that, we are shown the news of how the protagonist won the cross, and he even gave water to the girls, which made them very happy. The first girl wrote that this Chen Yuan is very courageous and she fell in love. The second did not understand how such a man could be called names. This is already crossing all boundaries. A third wrote that even if they continued to call him that, she would not love him less. I really like his photos from the competition. The fourth wrote that the more successful a man is, the more envious he is. She believes that Chen Yuan is not to blame for anything. The latter noted that his smile was just like a ray of sunshine. The director was shocked that all these commentators were girls. He did not understand whether Chen Yuan was the idol of all girls or not. He remembered the past. It reminds him of something. He was the best among the best. The director in the past was very handsome and all the girls blushed next to him, and the guys were angry that this peacock was the center of attention. He also understood that if a person is too perfect, then he must be ready to receive for it. They constantly wrote nasty things on his desk for his beauty. The teacher said that he is a parasite and he refuses to teach him, and also calls his parents right now. The director cried because of his past and said that he understood Chen Yuan. He asked Chen to wait, because they would definitely get to the truth. Such humiliation and slander. He, the head of this university, would never allow such a thing to happen. After that, the director gathered all the students in the gym. The director greeted everyone and said that rumors had recently spread on the forum about one of the students of their university, Chen Yuan. He conducted his own investigation and found out that all this was just blatant slander. The protagonist was wearing a ribbon and was confused, and today they are gathered here to restore his good name. Chen Yuan leads a proper lifestyle, is a fair person, always ready to come to the rescue, and he never brags about it. The director cried with joy and added that the real pride of their university, a good-natured man. He wanted everyone to learn from Chen Yuan. Everyone will become useful to society. Immediately, all the students started cheering and clapping and wanted to learn from Brother Chen Yuan. The protagonist did not understand what was happening, why he was being given a certificate of honor at all. He was given it for socially valuable personality traits. Fair and equal treatment of people. He wondered what kind of help others were and where in general he was doing something like that. Lai Yong was very angry and just didn't understand. These forum posts were supposed to destroy him, but it turned out the other way around. He didn't know why. Out of anger, he bit his t-shirt and did not understand if the teachers and the principal were blind or what. He should be standing on the stage and getting a diploma, not him. Immediately, he noticed Jian, who was happy and noted that the protagonist was very good. Jian's disposition had increased by 10 points and he was looking directly at her. The girl also looked at him and blushed, and her location increased by another 10 points. 1:29. After that, they show us that sports complex again. After the award ceremony, the students were already packing up and slowly leaving. Yang asked Jing if she wanted to explain anything to him. He saw everything. She applauded Chen Yuan, almost squeaked there. He didn't understand what it all meant. The girl was surprised and asked if he was all right. What kind of unreasonable bouts of jealousy? She can't be admired by people who deserve it. The girl turned around and added that the protagonist was just a student, but had done so many good things. However, he didn't care about wealth and fame, and Lai Yong was angry and burning. Afterwards, she remembered Chen Yuan and how he had won. She added that when he walked around him, he could have stood there proudly and accepted congratulations. But he behaved so humanly correctly and patted him again and blushed, and Lai Yong became even more angry. He grabbed her hand and told her to shut up. Yang shouted that Chen had not bypassed him. This could not be. The girl was in pain. She almost started crying and asked Jan to let her go because she was in pain. Yang was very angry and said that Chen Yuan was just not capable of sucking up to anything. Well, the coach liked him, so what? He was looking at her with crazy eyes. He believed that money and status decide in society. His father can buy him a Tesla. He asked what this Chen Yuan has. The protagonist passed by them and called someone on the phone and asked him to stop by. He added that at the university he tries not to shine too much, and not to take an expensive car. Yang and Jing were surprised. A car arrived immediately. His friend came to see him and he was surprised that he came in an incredibly expensive car and asked him not to do it next time. The bald man agreed with him and replied that he would be more careful. He was in such a hurry that he completely forgot about his preference to be closer to ordinary mortals and assured that this would not happen again. He opened the door for him and asked him to take care of his head. And Jan was just in shock. The protagonist got into the car and drove away. The girl told Jan that since he did not trust her, it was better for them to break up. Yang was just in shock. He didn't believe what he saw and he didn't even hear Jan. The girl realized that he didn't care at all that she had abandoned him. After that, the protagonist arrived at a certain place. He took out his card and ran it over the machine. Immediately, the bald man received a notification that 50 million yuan had been credited to his account. The protagonist said that he had translated everything. The bald man replied that it was a pleasure to deal with him. When Chen left, he said that now they were even and he needed to go to university. The bald man wanted to give him a ride. The protagonist replied that it was not necessary. His car was too noticeable. He went on his own and the bald man wished him a good road. The protagonist was walking down the street and thought that the house had been bought. Now he needed to put the squeeze on Zhao Yuki, a little more favor, and 25 points of his attributes. The guy on the street was surprised when he saw Chen waving documents like a fan, and his girlfriend asked the guy to keep his voice down. Chen wondered what else he could give her and what he could offer. The protagonist went into a rich man's chat and the man wrote that the protagonist was just incredible. He helped him with a financial issue. Another asked if he had bought his villa and thought it was cool. Another one noted that it had only been a couple of days, but he had already bought it and noted that Chen really had a lot of money. The man decided to tell them more. Chen bought a villa and gave it to a girl. At that moment, he really felt like a beggar. He was surprised that the girl was given a gift of tens of millions and he is jealous. The protagonist, after reading all this, wrote that he was always happy to help. Immediately, everyone agreed with him and someone even bowed down. After that, someone asked him if he needed a car because he has his own channels. The protagonist realized that this was the right idea and he could give the girl a car. 1:30. After that, they show us an expensive car dealership where the protagonist arrived. The guy who texted him came forward, and the girls were standing behind him. His name is Zhang Haoshan. His family owns a small business, and he owns a car dealership. He is glad to meet him. The protagonist took his business card and examined it carefully. He recognized the Zhang Corporation, the largest on the market. They create the most expensive cars. They also buy them from the West and transport them to this country. The protagonist smiled, because this company is the largest in the city. He figured that this guy was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. The protagonist noted that Zhang is so young, but already runs a car dealership. Zhang told him that he didn't need any pleasantries. He could just call him Brother Zhang and asked him to come by and show him the car. As for the age, he added that when he first heard about the protagonist, he imagined a pretty grown man. He added that he is not only so young, but also charismatic. The girl, looking at him, was surprised, because director Zhang personally accompanies him and did not understand who he was. Another thought that Chen was the son of some rich man. She told her to stop staring, because this is not a bird of their flight. Zhang said that he would not like to brag, but in this city his showroom has the best premium cars. The protagonist walked and looked around. He said that Chen would find absolutely any car here. The protagonist said that he wants Bugatti Chiron. Zhang looked at her and was very surprised. Chen laughed and asked if he had such a car. Zhang remembered about this car and was surprised. He thought that the protagonist was a joker, the most luxurious car produced in a limited edition and standing like an entire city. The protagonist realized that he did not have such a car. Chen asked about the Lamborghini Veneno and the Pagani Probe, but none of that happened. Zhang was shocked and thought that the protagonist had come to mock him. Zhang said that in their salon he could buy a car worth from $2 to $8 million. The protagonist realized that he did not have these cars either. He turned back and noted that he didn't have anything useful, and that he didn't have a particularly developed business. Zhang got angry and smiled maliciously, considering that he was able to purchase a house worth several tens of millions. But he does not believe that he can afford such cars. It's time to use his treasure. He turned and walked back to the secret car. Zhang approached her and took her by the sheet and said that he really would not find the cars he named here, but he would show him the most expensive car in their showroom. He threw off the sheet and shouted, "Go ahead, LaFerrari." This is a Ferrari LaFerrari. The engine capacity of the Ferrari LaFerrari is 6.3 liters. The engine power is 800 horsepower. Acceleration from a standstill to 100 kilometers takes 3 seconds for different generation. The maximum speed of this car is 350 kilometers per hour. It costs 22.5 million. Zhang was very worried and asked what he would say. The protagonist thought about it, because a Ferrari is not very expensive, but it is not cheap either. It will go as a gift for Zhao Yuki. He put his hand on his shoulder and told him that it was just over 20 million. He appreciates his efforts and will pay with a card. He also said that they drove this car to the #1 house in Jiang district. He handed him the card and Zhang agreed with him in a shocked state. Immediately, his phone started vibrating. He took it and realized that Liu Wenj was calling him. He wondered why he was calling him. Chen answered the phone and Liu shouted that his girlfriend had cheated on him and he was just in shock. 1:31. Liu said that it happened on his birthday. His girlfriend Liu Jia went to her friends to get a manicure, and by nightfall she was still gone. She didn't have an umbrella with her and he was very worried about her. As a result, he was just shocked that his umbrella fell to the ground. He witnessed a scene that broke his heart. At that moment, a clear picture appeared in his mind. The two of them kiss in the rain, but he is the drenched rat at this moment. He's in a lot of pain. They've been in a relationship for 3 years. He was about to introduce her to her parents. Liu cried a lot and drank a lot. The protagonist asked if he could stop drinking, because he was already drinking his 8th bottle. Liu asked his friend not to worry, because he just wants to get drunk and die. He asked a friend what he had done wrong and suggested that it was not too late to bring her back. Chen got angry and grabbed his friend by the collar, which shocked him. He shouted for Liu to come to his senses. It was her fault, not him. He asked where his pride was and that he was not a mumbler. His friend understood him and stepped forward. He fell on his knees and said that he understood everything, but he couldn't. The protagonist interrupted him and asked if he couldn't just put up with it. Does she think it was a mistake and she's actually not a bad person? Liu agreed. The protagonist realized that he should teach him a lesson and began to dial a number. Liu asked who he was calling. The protagonist hesitantly replied that Wen should just trust him, because he would arrange everything. The protagonist smiled maliciously and added that Liu Jia would crawl to him on his knees. The protagonist called Huoshan and said that he would like to take a couple of cars, not very expensive, about several million, and for him to contact reliable people who could be driving tomorrow. Liu was shocked that Chen had asked for cars for several million. Huoshan replied that he would do everything without problems. Everything would be at its best. Liu Huoshan was surprised and did not understand what these two personalities were when the protagonist took out the second phone. He called Liu and asked if she had a minute, because he would like to meet. Liu felt that Chen had been replaced in the blink of an eye, and the protagonist had already agreed and was waiting for her. After that, they show us a busy street, and that evening has already come. Liu ran to the protagonist and hugged him, while saying that she missed him, and Liu was just stunned. They all sat down at the table and ordered food. Liu poured water for the protagonist and he thanked her. Liu noted for himself that just one call and the girl for 8 points immediately flew here. He didn't understand what had happened to the sycophant Chen Yu and he knew. It actually looks like this. It's like she's sucking up to him. The protagonist introduced his good friend Liu Wenj to Liu and he greeted her shyly. Liu asked if he had called her so late just to introduce her to his friend. The girl thought about it, because Chen Yuan introduces her to his close friend, which means he likes her. The protagonist replied in denial. He just wants her to help them tomorrow. 1:32. After that, we are shown an expensive white car that was flying forward. Liu's ex-girlfriend, Liu Jia, was sitting inside. Her boyfriend told her not to even think about Liu. She would never be happy with that simpleton Liu Wenj. In a couple of days, because it's her birthday, he will give her a designer handbag. The girl agreed, but they had been in a relationship for such a long time. She noted that Ma should be more empathetic. Immediately, we are shown a Ferrari that overtook Ma's car. He quickly walked around him and stood in front of him. Ma shouted, "But how does he drive?" and abruptly hit the brake and swerved sideways. The car stopped quickly and pulled over to the side of the road. Ma climbed out of the window and shouted that the bastard had bought a license and couldn't drive. Immediately, he was very surprised and blushed. We are shown Liu, who was slowly getting out of the car and was wearing an incredible dress. She was so beautiful that Ma just fell in love with her and his nose started bleeding, and he even forgot what he was talking about before. Immediately, someone else got out of the car. It was Liu, who was wearing a gorgeous fur coat and looked very brutal. Liu Jia was shocked when she saw him. Liu hugged Liu and said she was scared. He just gave her a new car, and this fool almost scratched it. Liu was very afraid and his hands were shaking. He replied in embarrassment that if this had happened, it was okay, he would have just bought her a new one and that was it. Ma did not understand what was wrong with Liu Wenj. Why he looks like this and did not understand. Did he hide all this time that he had rich ancestors? Liu looked at Liu and was surprised. She got angry and asked Liu about this performance. Liu replied that no one needed her and that Liu should get into the car. Liu became even more angry and replied that she had known him for so many years and she was aware of how things were going in his family. Yes, she cheated on him, which was wrong, but today's performance, just disgusting to her. The protagonist was sitting in the car with Huoshan, and he noted that this woman had figured them out. The protagonist replied that there was nothing wrong. They just have to keep going. The most interesting things are waiting for them. After that, we are shown that a bunch of expensive cars were driving along the road. A moment later, a lot of cars stopped near them, which shocked Ma. Bai got out of the car and noted that Wenj was also here, and Ma was shocked by these rich people. Bai already had a lot of friends around and he asked Ma if he knew who he was. Ma replied with embarrassment that his name was Bai. He hugged Liao and Ma and asked the girl what he had told her, that his name is Ma Kai. His family owns coal deposits and he studied in America. He began to rub his head and Bai noted that this Ma Kai is an ordinary liar who pretends to be rich in order to get beautiful girls into bed. He asked if she really thought he was richer and laughed. And Ma asked Bai to let him go. After that, Bai left and added that his methods were as old as the world. Who would have thought that anyone would fall for them at all, and laughed again. He also told her to just look at herself, because she was not worthy of even the poorest person, and laughed again. And Liao Jia was just in shock, and it was as if she had been struck by lightning. 1-33. The girl began to get very angry and grabbed the heel and shouted that he was a brat, wanted to deceive her, and therefore she wanted to kill him. Ma was running away and asked, well, which one of them is without sin? Liu looked at this picture with sad eyes. After that, he turned around and told Liu to leave, and she agreed. Immediately he was surprised, and Liu asked why he suddenly stopped. He looked back and saw Liao Jia crying and begging Liu not to leave her. She's not vain at all, it's just that she comes from a poor family. She begged him to give her another chance. Liu went ahead and asked her not to touch him, and she was just in shock. He added that from today they are cutting off any ties. Don't write or call him anymore. Ma wanted to run away quietly at this time. Bai was walking forward with friends, and his friend noted that Bai, as always, does not go into his pocket for a word. Others pointed out that she was a poor little girl. Bai replied that he should go and calm her down. Immediately, Ma hit the protagonist, and Chen asked where he was going and if he wanted to get away. The protagonist replied that he would not leave here just like that. He thinks 100 slaps will be enough, but Ma was very afraid, and all the friends started raising Ma. After that, time passed and I showed us a nightclub where there were a lot of people. All the guys were there and drinking. Someone said that they were incredibly lucky to meet a man like Mr. Lone Wolf. That's exactly the nickname of the protagonist. Chen wants to thank everyone for their help. The guy replied that Huoshin's friends were their friends. Bai turned to the protagonist and said that he had heard about his activities on the shark streaming platform. He wanted to ask him for a little help. The protagonist was surprised and asked what he was talking about. Bai's friends looked at each other and were surprised. Bai confusedly said that there was one streamer, which he would really like to support, but this month the budget will not allow it. He doesn't know if Chen can help him. The protagonist thought that this song was good, and that he should start over. These rich kids look down on everyone. Huoshin told the protagonist not to listen to him, because Bai was just joking. Huoshin asked Xiao Bai if he was completely crazy. Why would Chen support her? Because this is too much. The protagonist loudly slammed his glass on the table. All the friends were surprised and realized that he was angry and that something was going to happen now. The protagonist unlocked the phone and said that let it be as a gift. He rolled the phone on a chair and said he would go to the toilet, and he could play a little. He went ahead and added that he might not save, and his friends didn't understand what else it was. Bai took the phone and was surprised that he could spend as much as he wanted. He trusts him so much. He pressed the rocket and figured that he really could not be petty. 1-34. The protagonist went ahead and noted that it would be much worse if they forced him to pay the bill. And he doesn't even worry about this, the system pays anyway. The protagonist got up to do things, and there was a huge guy next to him who looked at the protagonist's device. He was just in shock and screamed. He considered that the protagonist has a real dragon in size, and he himself has a small chick. Shen didn't understand what he was doing, but this huge guy was showing him a sign of respect. All the guys were around him and told Bai to send 2,000 more missiles, and even 3,000 more. They looked at it with lust and wanted him to push even more. The protagonist passed by them and asked why they were gathered here in a circle. Bai started crying and was glad that he finally came and asked Chen to save them. The protagonist took the phone and said that he had been gone for quite a long time, and they managed to spend only 20 million. The friends were shocked. They did not understand who this Chen was. They thought his family was richer than the Bank of Hell. Bai noted that at one time he spent a maximum of several tens of thousands, at most a little over 10 million. When he thinks about how many sports cars he could buy with this money. The protagonist replied that 20 million didn't sound very good and that's why he wanted to finish it off to 60. But Bai was shocked and shouted. He grabbed his arm and asked him to stop, because that's enough. She really doesn't cost that much, and I thought Chen was just incredible. Huoshin hugged his friend and asked if he would admit failure. Such people need to be respected, and not to arrange all sorts of checks for them. Today he was convinced of this. Bai took a glass of booze and asked the protagonist to forgive him for his rudeness. He learned a good lesson today. From now on, he has it at his disposal. A friend asked if 1 glass would be enough. 3 glasses would be better. Another asked which 3 glasses. 3 bottles were needed. Another friend asked if they were going to get drunk to death. All these girls were watching and the brown-haired woman asked who this guy was. He has a lot of influence. The white-haired one who just said the toast is Bai Killen from the Bai Real Estate Agency. The blonde noted that this is a party of rich kids from the cream of society. If you hang out with them, you can never worry about money again. The guy next to them asked if this was the lone wolf, the mysterious rich man who spent 10 million on a streamer. He dreams of being one. They immediately wrote something to the protagonist. He noticed it and was surprised. Chen told them to rest, but he had urgent business and therefore he wanted to see them next time. One friend asked that he had run away in a hurry and thought that Chen was afraid that he would be charged. The blonde man asked if he thought Chen couldn't afford to pay for a couple of bottles of booze. His annual income is Chen's pocket money. If he continues to test his patience, he will not vouch for himself. The protagonist had already sat down on the street and Xiaomir wrote to him. She wrote that she had returned to the city and would not wait to meet him. The protagonist replied to her that if so, they would meet tomorrow, and Xiao agreed and was delighted. The protagonist felt that after such an expectation, it was time to drown in favor points. After that, I show us the plane on which the girl arrived. Xiaomir thought that this was just an ordinary date, a little feminine charm and everything would work out. She thought this rich kid should be his goldfish. 1:35. After we are shown that Chen was texted by his ex-girlfriend Lin Shutong, she suggested that he start all over again. She had such a good dream yesterday. They were married, lived together in their villa. He went to work every day, and she and 6 babysitters looked after their child. Every weekend they went shopping with him. He bought her so many bags that she didn't even have enough room to store them. He took her to Paris to drink red wine and to Iceland to enjoy the northern lights. She woke up and realized that there was neither a bag, nor a polar blue one, nor his. She knows she hurt him, but she didn't mean it. Huang Junkai deceived her and only now does she realize that she needed him all this time. She would be a good girl in the future. She asked him to forgive her. It was a mistake that every man is forgiven for. Xiaomir asked the protagonist what he was watching there. The protagonist decided to delete the dialogue with the girl. Chen replied that it was nothing. It was just that someone would not calm down, and the girl was surprised. He smiled at her and asked her what she had just said. She recalled how her boss shouted that even a dozen of her most devoted fans would not cover the amount he had paid her. She should do anything, even jump into bed with him, but she should have him on the hook. She was angry because there was such a beauty in front of him, and he allowed himself to be distracted. She doesn't believe that she won't succeed. She said that Chen is so young, but already so rich. She thought he must be in a high position. We are shown the characteristics of the girl, as well as her attractiveness index, 7.8 points. The location was 60 points. The system reported that this was too high and it was impossible for her to contact him. The protagonist began to get angry about this, and felt that he had wasted all the money. He felt that he would have to lower the favorability level first. The protagonist, picking his nose with his finger, replied that he did not hold a high position, but was just a homeless man with no education. The girl was surprised that he did not have a job and thought that he had his own business. Otherwise, she did not understand where he got such funds. The protagonist replied that he was just spending his father's money. Now the company has gone bankrupt and they owe the bank several million. In fact, he met with her to ask her to return some of the money that he sent her and grabbed her hands, and the girl screamed because he picked his nose and then took hold of her. Her disposition began to decline rapidly and she asked if he didn't have money. Then why was he acting like he had it? I wanted to show off on her stream and she shouted that she had had enough. She was surprised at his words and asked if he was a man or who. It was just terrible. Xiaomir's disposition dropped to 0. She took the phone and added that she was also a fool, only wasting her time here with him. She called Lana and said she was at the airport cafe. She asked him to take her away from here as soon as possible, because she is being chased by some strange guy and she is very scared. The protagonist felt that he had met money-hungry women before, but he still had to look for such a manipulator. Later, time passed and they even show us that the plane on which Xiaomir arrived flew away. Lan flew into the establishment from 2 legs and asked who dared to touch his woman in broad daylight. Now he's going to punish the scoundrel. He was walking straight at the girl and Xiaomir noticed him. She was very happy and ran at him saying that she was very scared, because this pervert was grabbing her hand. Lan walked past her, which shocked her. He greeted the protagonist and asked why he was here, and was glad to see them, and Chen was surprised. 1:36. Lan said it was him. They were drinking with Brother Bai yesterday. The protagonist realized that it was Xiao Lan and said that he remembered him. Lan was very sorry that they didn't manage to have a couple more drinks yesterday. Who would have thought that they would meet like this? Today he's treating, and he can't refuse, and Xiaomir was surprised. Xiao didn't understand why he was fawning over him so much. Lan Zong is one of the representatives of the elite. If they talk about the golden youth of Seoul, his family owns industrial enterprises all over the city. She imagined that Lan was swimming in money and sitting on a golden throne. She was very surprised and said Lana's name. Xiao Lan himself got angry and told her to shut up, because Chen is a good friend of his close friend. He has so much money, more than all of them combined. The girl was surprised by the amount, which she could not even imagine. She felt that he had been testing her all this time to see how sincere she was. Would she really miss this opportunity? Immediately, she changed her look and felt that she needed to rehabilitate herself. She apologized for her rudeness to the protagonist and admitted that she was wrong, and asked if he forgives. The system reported that Zhu Yihan is successfully connected to the system. He should counterattack and get 25 gain points. The protagonist only looked at her because of the system. He agreed because she is still young, and therefore very stupid. It was just a joke and asked her to relax. Xiaomir was delighted and thanked him, calling him the best. Her disposition quickly grew up again. The protagonist smiled and thought that she was a streamer for a reason. As long as the opponent had money, favor would flow like a river. Unfortunately for her, he would not let her go so easily. Xiao Lan got angry and said that he had spent 10 million on her, and she invited him to such a diner. He told the protagonist that their meeting was not accidental, and then he treats them. He knows one restaurant that might suit his taste. The protagonist agreed with him. How can he refuse him? The protagonist got into the car and Lan asked him to sit down carefully. Xiaomir shouted at them to wait, because she was going with them. After that, we are shown that the car went at high speed. Xiaomir sat next to him and moved closer and closer to him. Then she approached him and hugged his hand. She asked him if he was more angry, because she was really wrong. The protagonist replied that everything was fine and he wasn't angry. The girl noticed that he was going to enter the shark and did not understand what he wanted to do. Shen went to a streamer and the girl told him not to forget to subscribe. Xiaomir was surprised and hoped that he wasn't going to send her money. He immediately began to click on the missiles insanely quickly and send them to her, from which Mir was simply shocked. 1:37. He was sending missiles to her very quickly at an incredible speed. A moment later, he had already sent her 3,000 missiles, which made the girl very surprised. She even lost consciousness. Immediately, other workers ran up to her and shouted for doctors to be called as soon as possible, because Own had never seen so much money in her life. Xiaomir was surprised by his speed and saw something like this for the first time. Even if others can poke so fast too, they just don't have that much money. The girl screamed, because if she hadn't screwed up earlier, these 30 million would have been hers. She felt that this Chen was just bullying her, but she thought he was very handsome when he spent money. Her disposition increased by 30 points, if only to imagine that his fingers are not tapping on the phone screen, and they slide over her body. Her disposition increased by another 30 points. The protagonist looked at her and did not understand what was wrong with her. Her disposition grows when she spends money on others and is surprised. After that, Lan said that they were finally in place. This is the best private restaurant in Seoul, Black Pearl. Only certain circles can eat here, and therefore everything is confidential here. 3 features make this restaurant the best. The protagonist was surprised and noted that the outstanding dishes, picturesque landscapes, and what else? Lan replied that Chen had seen enough. He guessed correctly about the first 2, but here's the third one. They show us Yuki, who was sitting in the gazebo. Lan replied that the third was the boss's daughter, Zhao Yuki. Immediately, the girl paid attention to the protagonist and was surprised. The protagonist was also surprised when he noticed Chairman Zhao. The girl turned her gaze to something else. She saw that Xiaomir was hugging the protagonist. Her disposition dropped by 5 points and she got very angry and broke her musical instrument, which shocked all 3 of them. She looked back and even started crying. The girl began to run away, and the protagonist was upset because he had very little left and it would be possible to get gain points. The protagonist decided to run after her and did not know if he would ruin everything at a critical moment. They both ran around the corner. The protagonist caught the girl and stood in front of her. Yuki shouted that he was terrible. He was just playing with her feelings and she was asking him to let her go.